Well, first of all, I was in home, and because I was in home and a waif, I had to join somewhere when I reached the age of 14. So I eventually joined the Queen's Own Royal West Kent Regiment down at Maidstone in Kent. And from there, of course, you just simply done your training and waited during the war. Then I was sent to India, came back from India, and then just after that, the war broke out. So because I was too young, or under 20 years of age, I was sent up to Luton, Bedfordshire, to prepare trucks to be issued to the army, different army units, etc., around the area. That's to make sure that all the stores were correct. But eventually, my sister Irene, she very kindly signed the paperwork, and I went back to the Royal West Kent Depot in Maidstone, and they shipped me to Malta. And of course, we went down via France, and then across France down to Marseilles on some rickety old boat, and we eventually got to Malta. War was first declared, we were in the barrack room, and if I remember rightly, they were playing the Storm Night Little Drummer Boy on the actual radio at the time. I don't know if you know the song, but this Little Drummer Boy, you mean all the world to me. Well, it's the kind of song we had in those days, and we was in this barrack when it said war broke out. Well, of course, to us as young people, we thought, oh, a new chance of a life. We've got to have a different type of life all round. It's going to be different. But what we didn't know at the time was how different it was going to be. And so, as I said, I then had to, fortunately, I didn't go with the battalion to France, which the battalion did go to, and actually got practically wiped out there. But I went up to Luton in Bedfordshire, as I mentioned before. My actual duty, first of all, was just as a normal infantryman. Several things like when we got to Malta, we had to dig the trenches, put up the defence posts, barbed wire in, and pens for aircraft, and all that kind of thing. We were just a dog's body, as it were, and we could do anything we were asked to do. I mean, we used to, I don't know if you know Malta, but it's normally large blocks of stone, and they were used to make defence posts out of. It was practically bulletproof, of course, and that would, of course, be our defences in case of it. But, of course, we also, as you will find out, we had to go up on the aerodrome and do all kinds of jobs up there. Well, when I got to Malta, it's very hot, and although it was at winter time, to us it seemed fairly hot. And we had to sleep out in the open. And as a matter of fact, just being under the trees and everything, nothing really seemed to happen, first of all, except training. And as I mentioned before, it's all these different jobs you have to do as an infantryman, you know. We didn't face much of it. It's very friendly country, as you know. They look after the British very well. And as I said, we were mainly doing the work we had to do, and we didn't mix much for the occupants. But eventually, I must say this, I did go to the TOC 8 and met the lady I eventually married. I met my wife in the TOC 8. I went in there one evening, and she was there. She was a supervisor in there, and that was in Teeny Street in Salima. And the just provided a bed and somewhere to eat and rest after, doing your work on the aerodromes or wherever you were working. The first air raid I was caught in was on Luqa aerodrome, and I was manning a gun post up there. And all it was is that they came over in about, I'd suppose, nearly 200 aircraft at a time, and they just dived down and draft you, and you blazed away like mad, and you didn't think of what you were doing. Basically, you just carried out what you were trained to do. You just simply done everything automatically, as though you were wound up and somebody turned the switch and you just got on with the job. Yes, as I said, blocks made out. All you do, you put them together like kiddies put blocks together, but in a larger distance. So you've got a gap to fire through, and you used to put a tin roof on and then cover that with soil so it looked as though part of the earth. So it was really just a straightforward job, really. There's nothing sort of sensational about it. We built what we call aircraft pens to push the aircraft in, like Spitfires and whatever bombers we had there, or whatever planes we had. And we used to build them sort of in a pyramid shape on the sides, so you push the aircraft in, but of course there's a front opening for the aircraft to go in. But you sort of built them up like in, what shall we say, like a shape of a tent, but with a gap in the middle so you could just put the aircraft in. They're quite large, and they were sometimes filled with, or made not only out of the blocks of stone, but out of tin, petrol tins filled with soil, and built in the same way as you would brick up a wall or anything like that, you know. That was to keep the plane safe, and we had nothing to do with the actual maintenance of the aircraft. They had their own people to do that. I'm afraid that food was a shortage of everything else. You know, it's hard to describe exactly what it was. It was McConaughey's and corned beef and hardtack, and tea had to be used until the last drop could be strained out of the tea. So if you can understand that, tinned milk instead of that, and sometimes we might have some form of cake made out of tinned biscuits and so I don't know. It's just simply whatever we got, we were grateful for. But I will admit that when we was on Mars, we managed to get some what we call eggs or bite. It was eggs and bread, and we got that from the local farmer. Well, whether it was legal or not, we used to pay him sixpence, and we used to have a munch of that when we felt hungry. Well, I've met those on both the sides of the family side and everywhere else. And everywhere we went, we were treated with great respect. Well, we fully admired them. Remember, we had to admire them. They were backing us. They were first-class people, and they got, I suppose they regarded us as their guardians, really, because we had to be there for their defence. Well, the butterfly bomb was sort of a round bomb with fins on top, and it used to come down whirring through the air. Now, you had to be very careful with these because some were timed, some were, if you picked them up, they'd go off. So what we used to do, if possible, we used to tie a piece of string around them, disappear down into a slit trench and pull. And if they didn't go bang, we trust their luck. But the only ones we couldn't really judge was the ones where it were timed. Of course, you didn't know when they were going off, but they normally went off fairly quickly, so we left well alone. But we had people who were there that was experts from the REs, and they would come in and look after. Mainly the main people to do with that were the bomb disposal people. You know, we shouldn't really be allowed to touch them. But being young and ignorant and a few other things, I expect, we did the wrong thing at times.
You mentioned before your wife and meeting in Malta. Did you ever fear for her safety while all these attacks were happening?
Oh, yes, of course we did. But fortunately, in that strange teeny street, there was a big air raid shelter. And she managed to get most of the times. We got fairly good air raid warnings because we got the sirens going. And we also had the wireless came out, and it used to say, Tanal Talataki Malira, and that meant to say the aircraft were coming. And Tanal Talataki meant just that point that they were coming. So we just have to go down the shelter with the wife. If I was home on leave, of course, I would go down with her and then come back up afterwards. This became like a normal thing to do. It wasn't just anything special, and not to us at the time. You didn't think of it as special. You don't think of these things as special in wartime. You just get on and do it. The simple thing to say about that is the fact you rely on one another to survive. You work together as a team. You taught as a team from the very beginning of your army training, and you just work together. And I'm afraid to say that I don't know of one of my friends that I met in Malta or one of my comrades that were there in Malta. Although I go down to the reunions, and I haven't met one of those that were with me at the time. I had Mary's family, that's my wife, who I married, in the 5th of July 1941. I had relatives and that sort of well looked after us as well, you know, so that mainly it's because I had a family, I used to go home to the family and didn't really go out on the streets or anything like that. I know they had what they called the gut and that in Malta, but that is when, you see, where people want to go out and booze and meet ladies of pleasure, as they used to call them. And I wasn't interested in that whatsoever. While you're working together, you're comrades. you're friends with all. You've got to be friends with all. You can't start fighting and battling and everything. Don't matter if you get a rank or whatever it was. I did become a lance corporal eventually. And you do what you have to do, and you don't call them friends, you call them comrades, which is basically, I suppose, the same as calling them friends. What it means to say, if you're going to take any offensive action, you've got to rely on what orders are given and how the sub-person will carry them out. But fortunately, we didn't do any hand-to-hand fighting or anything like that in Malta, so we didn't have to worry too much about that. It's just if you had to man a gun, you make sure that it was done. If you'd done the guard duty at night time, you had to make sure you were doing the guard duty. You didn't go to sleep or anything like that. No matter how tired or hungry you were, you had to carry on doing your duties. And that's what I'm talking about, relying on one another to do the job which we were trained to do. On the RAF, we used to have the Wimpy bombers mainly, and it used to have, we used to take the fuel to the aircraft and also take the bombs. It used to be towed, and we used to take them in position, and the actual fitters used to put them up into the aircraft and do what they have to do. But mainly our work was to do the dog's body work, to just carrying and carrying or doing everything they want us to do, really, basically. You never know what you're going to get asked to do, to be honest with you. I mean, it was terrible sights we see, but, there's nothing we could do about them. When you think an aircraft can come in and catch a light, it'll explode, and catch a light, you can't get at the aircraft, and you see people in there. It's when you see people blown to pieces, and you never live it down. I actually was not down when the Pedestal convoy actually arrived. I didn't see it actually come in the harbour, but we knew it was coming in, and we knew it had come there because it was like bush telegraph, as it were. It went round the island like wildfire, that the ships were coming in, and our job was normally to go down and unload them. But fortunately, this time, when the Pedestal convoy came in, we didn't have to go down and unload. But we have to do what we're just told to do. You just get a gang together or whatever platoon or a company together, and you should go down and do your work, and that was it. And when you can see photographs, which are produced, you can see that area is completely obliterated. And when you can see that there's women and children and everything involved, that makes it a different story. I didn't return straight to England. When I left Malta, I left my wife there for obvious reasons. And by the way, I mentioned the fact that I had a daughter out there. She was born on the 25th of July, 1942, in Imtafa Hospital. So I left my wife and my daughter there, and I came home. I came to Egypt. We went down to Kabrit and Geneva and done what they call wet and dry shod training. That's boats or on land. That's basically what it means. And for a while, we went up to Arfad in Libya to train I should repeat. We went up to Lebanon, Arfad in Lebanon, for what they call mountaineer training. Now, at the time, I'd been trained in using the anti-tank guns. So it's a matter of us lugging that anti-tank gun in pieces up and down the mountain and back again. And then we came back, and then we were sent up to the Dodecanese islands of Leros and Samos. Now, I was stopped. My company was actually stopped, which was C Company, was stopped at Samos. As a matter of fact, I did not go to Leros as such as with the battalion that the rest of the battalion went to. And eventually it landed us with only about 20 of us staying on Samos. And we had to make sure that the stores came in, got onto ships, and were sent up to Leros. Well, eventually we found out that Leros had fallen, and we were told we had to move from Samos. But that the same day as we were told to move, in the harbour was being strafed and bombed by the Germans, and they give a good pasting. But fortunately, there was a minesweeper there, and we got on the minesweeper. The minesweeper had come in from Leros with German prisoners of war on, wounded ones, and we managed to get staked down the Turkish coast, hiding under the cliffs by day and travelling by night. and behind us we had a landing craft full of prisoners of Italian and German prisoners of war. So we had a very exciting time going back to Haifa. That really covers the whole episode after Malta till I got from Egypt to Samos and back from Samos to Egypt again. It was just a minesweeper, dear. It's just a ship. Now, what the name of it was or anything, I never did find out that there wasn't any. They just had numbers, and all they had was a number on it. I think it was something like 146 or something like that. And it was just one that used to lay mines or sweep mines. So it was just a comparatively small boat. It's not a large boat at all. And we were crowded on it. So you can imagine we had good food on it, I must admit. The Navy had good food, I suppose they were well stocked. But it was just a small ship which we had to do. We used to do watches as well on the actual top ship. But we never had to sort of do any other work at all on it. We just had to be I think we just had to hide ourselves occasionally, so we didn't have to do anything. I returned to England and went down to Maidstone in Kent. And for my sins, they sent me on several courses. One of them was a mines and booby traps course, which I'd been teaching in Egypt for years. And I got top marks there because I didn't have to. They couldn't tell me anything I didn't know, and I probably knew more than they did at home because I've been dealing with them, the mines and booby traps out there. And also they sent me on a small arms course, which once again is a thing that I've been doing for years. So it's like teaching somebody who didn't have to be taught. But that was just the fact that I think they wanted to get rid of me for a while and give me something to do. There was a little bit before that. After I'd been to these courses, they sent me down to 164 Infantry Archer at Barmouth in North Wales to treat officer cadets. We were down there for a while, and then we moved to Chester. Then from Chester we went to Trenton Park in Staffordshire. So I went to 3 places. But all we had to do was to train officer cadets. And we had to go out firing up in the ranges, up in the mountains and that. And we used to fish with grenades in these lakes. But that's another story again, isn't it? So we were just doing their infantry training, small arms weapons, mortars, rifles, and firing over the heads of the advancing troops and that kind of thing, just teaching them. And I was a sergeant by then, by the way, and I graduated to a sergeant instructor. And there we had a chap called RSM Cop there, and I've got a nickname of Junior. Now, the story as it goes, I'd got down to Barmouth in North Wales, and one of the chaps down there said one night in the sergeant's mess, when we were imbibing the good stuff, he said, "Quiet, Junior." And the next morning, the RSM used to do all the drill on the promenade. And I was walking across the promenade to go to his office, and a voice said, "Sergeant Junior." Took no notice, you see, so I blithely went on. There was a sound of boots coming behind me, running up to me, and he said, "The RSM wants you at the double." So I doubled over the RSM, and the RSM said, "When I call you, I expect you to call." And you know when a guard out of an RSM of the Coldstream Guards would speak like. I said, "Well, you never called me, sir." He said, "I did." He said, "I called out Sergeant Junior." I said, "I'm sorry, sir, my name is Sergeant Rixon." And he looked at me fairly sternly. He said, "Report to my office." He never did apologise. So, but we remained good friends afterwards, so it was quite all right. But that's how I got the nickname of Junior. You'll see it on my poetry. Well, after the war, what did I do? I eventually came out of the army in 1956, was it? Yeah. But after the war, I sent to the Remy down in Holland in Devon to train, once again, national servicemen. I seem to be always training people anyway. And so after a while, I got promoted to staff sergeant in charge of stores. And so from there, they posted me from Asins to Korea. And from Korea, I was out there for nearly 18 months. And I eventually got promoted out there to warrant officer. But I did have one rest and recuperation over in Tokyo, where I managed to get to Hiroshima to see the damage that had been done, and where they were still rebuilding and doing that, But that's the only thing I did. And eventually I came back over to Korea. And then from Korea, they sent me to Curie in Japan, ready for coming home, where, because I was a warrant officer, they made me do all the officers. And eventually I managed to get to Singapore. My family were there on the way out from England, and my wife was taken off because my son John got pneumonia badly, and he was taken off the ship there. They were taken off the ship, and in Africa, and eventually they did eventually join us, but he was very seriously ill, and actually a plane was standing by at Changi in Singapore to take me over to Mombasa should I be needed. But fortunately, I didn't have to be, and eventually they joined me in Singapore. And after Singapore term, I came out back to England. They were talking about me going somewhere else. They didn't give me the job I wanted. I wanted to be in the stores, and they made me a company sergeant major. And if you know anything about company sergeant major work, nobody wants the job. And I decided that I'd had enough. So in 1957, I came out the army, and I'd done all kinds of jobs you could think of. Tallyman, that's knocking at the doors to Sullivan. Securicor, worked in pubs in the evenings, went round selling insurance at night, anything to make an easy bomb, bought some machines and done grass cutting, and all those things which, when you come out of the army, you've got to make your way, you try to make as many pennies as you can to bring up a family, because the pensions was just as pitiful as mine is now, and that is it as it is. So I eventually finished with that lot, and a letter came through one day and said, would you like to come back into the army as regards a civilian? So it's got what they call a barrack accountant. That's marching people in and out of married quarters. So I went back and that. Eventually I got promotion to the equivalent of a captain, but became accommodation services officer. And I'd done that up till 1986. So I was then there second from 1963 to 1986. So really I've been with the army most of my service. As I said, I retired from the army, and I just had to find something to do, and I did find something to do all the time. I was never out of work, but it was a bit hard finding it way through after you come out of the army. You get no help those days. You just had to trust to luck. You had to use your own initiative, basically, which we were taught in the army to use initiative anyway, so the army taught me quite a lot. To a friend. He will not see the bluebells blooming in the woods, nor do the weekly shopping to purchase household goods. He will not see the swallows flying high into the sky. I always have to wonder why that good chap had to die. He will not see his homeland, the place where he was born. He will not see the barber by whom his hair was shorn. He will not have the pleasure of kids to smile or cry. I often have to wonder why this man had to die. He will not hold a grandchild in the folding of his arm. He will not be the solace of a child's fears to calm. He will not know a woman's love as years go slowly by. I always have to wonder why this good man had to die. He will always be a memory to those who with him served. The medals that should have bedecked his breast lie dormant, unreserved. He will no longer able be the armistice to attend. I often have to wonder why I had to lose a friend. He will not have to worry over many an earthly thing. He will not know the pleasure of or hear the choir sing. I wonder if he thinks of me in the ground wherein he lies. To me he will always remember as the greatest and the best. Oh.
That's beautiful.
Over the harbour they came in their flights, carrying the swastika. Oh, what a sight! The Spits and the Hurries roared up to meet, to harry and punish, and then to defeat. The gunners were busy, the sky is all black, the smoke and the fire is all from the flak. The bombs knock down houses, churches and all, and the petrol explodes in a great fireball. The hangars are ruined, the craft on the ground receive the same treatment, an almighty pound. The fire bell rings, we rush out to slave, for what we can be rescued, or bodies to save. A pilot is trapped in his burning plane. We rush to his aid, we can feel his pain. No effort is spared, but the task is beyond the efforts of those who wish to respond. Suddenly, in silence, the enemy's gone. When will this war end, all the wrong? Slowly and sadly, we go back to bed to say a short prayer for the living and the dead. Junior. It's so difficult to get, the story across to people, because unless you've experienced it, comrades are comrades. Wherever we go, if you meet any comrade in any other it is, Navy, Army or Air Force, we're all comrades. We'll never be anything different. Once you've served in the services, you're a comrade. It's a thing that doesn't really happen in Civvy Street because they don't get together en masse. You know what I'm getting at? You don't have to rely on one another. You all got your individual jobs. You all got. And very rarely there's jobs that you have to consider for where you've got life threatening. Although there is, of course, we got the firemen. That's a good thing. That's a good example. They rely on one another. So basically they get the same sort of comradeship once they've been a fireman. As I know from one of the firemen that had been my son-in-law's brother who died recently. He was a fireman. So I know he had lots of sorts of comrades in the same area. So when he retired, we are all comrades. We had to rely on one another. No, I can't talk for every unit for obvious reasons, but I can talk for our unit. We were remember that most of these convoys were together for a long time, but eventually we began to split up. Remember, I went from one battalion to another, and it was like going from another unit. But I was accepted into that same battalion as though I'd been sent there all my life. As you know, because, as I said, we relied on one another. I can't stress it any more than that. You're doing a job that you've got to do, you've been trained to do. You do it as best to your ability, which I've always been able to do, fortunately. And you rely on one another. And I keep stressing this one point, you rely on one another. And you're scared at times. I mean, you've got to be scared. But after a while, it kicks in that you don't think anything more about it. You just get on to do the job. What can we say? You become indifferent to things. You more or less say to yourself, well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. Basically, if a bomb's going to hit you, it's going to hit you. You can't dodge it. So, and it's no good the old saying the same bomb doesn't, or another bomb doesn't same place as another bomb, because I've seen it when it's happened. One hole's been made, and another bomb's come down practically straight away and made it bigger. So it's just, once again, it's just a matter of comradeship. As I said, I got married on the 5th of July, 1941. The story about that, of course, there's a story attached to that. I don't know if you know, but when you ask to get married, you have to go before your company commander, which happened in this case to be PCM Buckle, and I have to ask permission to marry. He said, you know it won't last. I was a private Rixon then, of course, it's private Rixon was his exact words. But eventually I did get the okay to get married. And we got married, as I said, on Malta, in Hamroon, the church. And we had a sort of a mild wedding, a kerosene, which is a horse and trap, as it were. You would call them in England, I suppose. And 4 white horses. We went through ceremony, we had a little get-together afterwards. I had 2-day honeymoon, and that was it. And from there on, it was just a matter of fact. Eventually, as I told you, there was my daughter, Sarah Elizabeth, who's married to the Queen's Armourer, by the way, now. She was born in Imtafa on the 25th of July, 1942. And she's one of my family of three. My daughter was upstairs, probably you saw her upstairs with my son-in-law. That's my youngest daughter. And my son John is at home at work. Brian, her husband, is by trade works in the building industry for all his life. My son is a chippy by trade. He does all the work, if you like. So I've got everybody on my side to look after me.
When you were in Malta and you had to leave your wife and your daughter there?
Yeah.
How did that feel?
That didn't feel very bright at all. Very emotional. And remember, her mother was there as well. But she had to leave her mother and she had to come back to England. Eventually she had to apply to my sister. She applied to my sister, could she come and live with her? And she eventually lived with my sister for a while, and then when she went to live with her sister, and she was expecting Margaret. Margaret was born in Todmorden, 86 Longfield Road, to be exact, although we were living in 7 Bank Street. But I got the Bank Street after Margaret had been born. Well, I went up to Dodecanese on Thailand until we came back. That was about 18 months or so.
That felt like a long time.
Well, it seemed years, it's like everything else. And there was hardly any correspondence between us when we went up the Dodecanese Islands. Wartime, your mail is never the same. But I must admit, from England, my sister kept me in touch. My sister Irene, she kept in touch with me, which was a blessing into itself,
And you said you went to Hiroshima?
Yes. We just went on a coach trip there, We saw them. I think I've still got some pictures somewhere at home of the actual devastation that was there. And we thought, and I thought what we went through in Malta was nothing compared to what they went through, although it was horrendous in Malta, don't get me wrong. The number of people killed and so forth, the churches and the buildings destroyed and valuable things. I still thought then what a waste war was. Because have we gained a lot or not? Nobody can ever tell me. No, I don't think it changed me as a person. I've been a strict Catholic, and so I kept my morals to myself and my ideas to myself, and that's it. I kept to a standard, and I still believe in that standard, and so does my family. So I'm afraid there's not much I can answer on that. The fact I was a good Catholic. I do the actual readings in church. I'm a special minister in the church. Well, the first one, of course, is the British Empire Medal. That was awarded me in Korea for doing my job. As far as I'm concerned, I'd done my job the best I could. But I went out there as a staff sergeant, had to take over the technical stores, which I had no idea about, so I had to learn really rapidly to take over for one in the REBE units. REBE repairs all the equipment for the army, basically. So these were the Second War medals as they go along to that one. Then you've got the Korea medals, the Malayan medal, Long Service and Misconduct medal, Good Conduct medal, with which you got £5 given you. And this one is the 50th anniversary George Cross medal from Malta. It's not the George Cross medal as you know it from they call it the George Cross medal, but technically it's the George Cross 50th anniversary commemorative medal, which the Queen kindly gave us permission to wear on the left side of her normal medal, because we got no other medal that was actually issued for Malta itself, but the Maltese government got it. And once again, I was involved in that as well. And I've got the only listed, I think, in the United Kingdom by the producers of the actual 21,000 odd people that got awarded this medal, when the Malta government only thought there was going to be about 5,000. But once again, it's just something I got involved in with PRO, is of course for the George Cross Highland Association, which is my favourite association. A short while ago, I was down at Warner's with my wife, and a young couple come up and said, because they saw the badge on my blazer, and said, "Thank you for what you've done." And for a moment, I was stunned because I didn't know what they really meant. She said, well, you must have been in the Second World War. That's very emotional. And, of course, what I actually did then was I referred it to the fact that my wife was also there. She was there in the wartime as well, and she went through it as well. And we had quite a long little chat about it, things and that. But she was I was so amazed that anybody actually came up. But it's obviously people do know and they do respect what we did. But we didn't expect to be called heroes or anything. We just went on to do a job that we were trained to do. But they called us heroes, and you can't blame us for that. I can feel sad like everybody else. You've probably seen it, won't you? I have visions that you can't put down on paper. You can't. It's not as though you could put it on there, for instance. I've seen things through my eyes that you'll never be able to see. But how could you put it down how could you explain it in writing or in any way? I try to write bits of poetry about it. Probably that's the only way I've got of expressing myself in the same way. And I've written the book. And I've read about it. I read the book and I've cried. I'm not ashamed to say. I'm a little wimpy, really. And ex-sergeant major and a wimpy.